Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing Maria. This was directed by Pablo Larraín. This is the third biopic that he's made that is centered around a famous female figure. He did so with Jackie Onassis in Jackie, he did so with Princess Diana in Spencer, and now he is doing so with Angelina Jolie in Maria. And yes, I am loving these one-word minimalist titles these days. It's like you could see this as a biopic trilogy. These are very arty, poetic, psychological types of biopics that are kind of meta, very reflective. If there's one thing that I can say for Larraín, he has taste. I mean, he has absolutely exquisite taste. It is evident in all three of these films, just the detail, the aesthetic. Everything is handled with a lot of specificity. So if you really love beautifully curated images like that, especially like what you saw in the other two films, then, this is the movie for you. But obviously, if you did not like Spencer or you did not like Jackie, then you're definitely not going to like this one. And that's my problem with all three of these movies, is they're far too similar to each other. But I will say that Maria, I think, is maybe the most fully realized film in this trilogy. I think this one comes the closest to having, proper drama to it and having some heart. But unfortunately, we're too caught up in the essence of these personas rather than using that aesthetic to find something more raw and human. And so therefore, I find the essence, in this movie empty. Now, is it beautiful to look at? Certainly. The costumes in this movie, oh my God. But it just feels like we're chasing ideas. We're chasing the idea of Maria Callas. We're chasing her perfume, but not her. I could not help but compare this film to one of my favorite films of all time, and that would be Sunset Boulevard. It's essentially the same framework, where you've got that aging diva opera star that is locked away in her Paris apartment, and it's gorgeous. She's brooding, stewing in the past. She's addicted to pills. She's mentally unstable. So, it feels like a 19th century novella or something. It's like the yellow wallpaper. In this case, though, we are focusing on Maria Callas's final act. It's her final few days while she's alive. And in this time, she's reminiscing. She's coming full circle. She's, returning to the womb. She is so lost to delusion at this point. And yeah, when I say this is like Sunset Boulevard, I really mean that. Just, they have like the butler character who's kind of like a stand-in for Max. And you have this young reporter coming in, and it's meant to be like this weird romantic prospect, I guess you could say. And so, you could see that as the William Holden role. Now, Maria is very different from Sunset Boulevard when it comes to tone and all of that, but because the framework is what it is, I can't help but compare the two. But when I think about Sunset Boulevard, that's a movie. You know what I mean? Like when I say it's a movie, I mean it's got grit to it, it's dramatic, it's complex, it's gothic, it's got horror elements, it's eccentric, the humor in it is amazing. It's also a tragedy. I think it's one of the most brilliant Hollywood movies made about show business ever. And so when I look at a movie like that, and I look at these new kind of postmodern movies, it's a real struggle, because Maria feels like if you took Sunset Boulevard and ripped all the spicy, juicy bits of it that make it that movie. You know what I mean? It's like, who wants to watch Sunset Boulevard if you can't at least make fun of Norma Desmond just a little bit? I mean, more than just a little bit, but it's like, she's such a tragic character, and she's so deeply disturbed, and it's creepy, and yet there's an element of it where, with perspective, it's hilarious. In Maria, when you're watching this woman and she's just brooding and marinating in her own, misery in the past, all of that, it's boring because there's just not much conflict. She's never explored beyond just the mystique of who she is. And for me, that's just not enough. I need more tread in the tires. Again, I think it's more about the presentation of the movie. That is the strength. So when I look at Larraín, like, I think about the movie Maestro, which came out last year, which was also a biopic quite similar, but I feel like this is the movie that Maestro wishes it could have been. Neither of those movies are for me. I just think that this one is a lot more sophisticated in the writing and just the way that it looks. I just don't think all of this money should be going to these types of movies when it feels like we're only here to capture these wispy, poetic moments that aren't really tied to anything. A lot of this feels like one of those Vogue fashion short films that you see on YouTube, but just like a long version of it. And you've got, a bit of a story and some dialogue threading it together, certainly, but it's just like there's no intrigue to it. When I think about Maria Callas and like a biopic, there's so much you could do with that, because she's a very interesting woman, and especially opera, being an opera singer, there's a lot to explore there, because like there's so much emotion that is just bursting out of it, especially when it comes to the Italian romantic era operas. They're bloody and they're passionate. They're so full of richness. It's like you can feel God when you hear it. And the fact that the film doesn't capture or mirror any of that melodrama, the highs and the lows that you get from opera, I think it's a wasted opportunity. There are a lot of flashbacks in the film to kind of ground it in the narrative, but I just feel like we're just getting the whiffs of perfume. Again, I wanted a lot more from these flashbacks, especially when it comes to her romantic relationship with Onassis, and especially the whole JFK thing. I didn't know any of that. I don't know much about Maria Callas as a person. It gives you a couple scenes to establish certain things, but I wanted some interaction here, some surprise. That would have been a meaty section, I think, to really explore her as a person, especially her flaws. But I just don't think that Larraín is that interested in his subjects. He's more kind of interested in the sensationalism of celebrity. And so all this romantic beauty, it doesn't build to anything. There aren't any real emotional climaxes where I can feel like a recklessness, a sense of danger. None of the power of opera is captured, certainly in the writing, but I don't think it's captured in the film either. It's like, yes, it's a beautiful film, but it's too controlled. When you're really exploring the art in this way, I think the filmmaker needs to know when it's time to cut loose and just let it fly. He wants every little hair in place, and that is his style, but I just want a little bit of messiness there to keep things interesting. Another thing that's very popular in films that I struggle with these days is the whole gimmick of what you're seeing may or may not be real. And I think it's something that can be done well. It's so tough to pull off without sacrificing, real meaningful conflict. And in this case, it just felt like a convenient way not to push the characters or the ideas into any interesting places. It's lazy to me. Not to say people didn't work hard on this movie. They absolutely did. There is a lot of time and a lot of care that went into every single image. I just feel like the focus is not where I think it needs to be. Stop polishing the stuff in the corner that you've been polishing forever. It's already beautiful and sparkling. It's like, go look at that leaky pipe that's in the corner. Work on the binding of the book before you get started on the cover art, because, if there's no binding to hold the book together, then there's no need for cover art. And it is frustrating because I think this movie it's flirting with vulnerability. It's like it's wanting to push to those big emotional moments. There were moments in this movie that were almost genuinely moving to me, but they just didn't quite materialize. And a lot of those had to do with Maria, I think, when she's having to face herself. And I mean, like, she's having to face her instrument, her voice, because, there's a lot of complex emotions associated with that at this point in her life because she's lost it. So there's insecurity, and it's devastating to see somebody who was once so amazing and powerful be so frail. But seeing them knocked down, I think, is necessary. And I do think that those are the parts where Angelina Jolie shines the most in the part. I think she gave a pretty good performance here. I'm not some massive fan of Angelina Jolie, but I do think that she has, a real ability to be cinematic. Obviously, earlier in her career, she had that edge and danger that was it was very interesting. But here she's settled into herself like a proper movie star. And so there's like a mature elegance to her, and she's stunning as ever. The camera will always love her, but I think here, she showed some sensitivity mixed with some jadedness, and there's a lot of tragedy there, yet you can still see that little girl. It's definitely more convincing for me than both Natalie Portman and Kristen Stewart were in the previous two films. I do think that this performance is still too manicured, but I don't know if that's necessarily her fault. It might just be more she's not given a lot of stuff to work with here. But I will say, and this is spoiler alert, but I'm going to try and be vague about it, but there's a moment where she gets to sing like this final song, and it's meant to be like a big release of sorts, and I think her performance is pretty fantastic there. So again, we're close, like the emotions are almost stirring in me, but it's just like the work is not where it needs to be. I also would have liked to see more the way music serves Maria in pure ways. It's like, yes, obviously there's a torture to it, and it's tragic in her life always, but it's like I wanted to see more about the elation, because there's not just the masochism and the tragedy, there's beauty too. And I would have loved to see what goes into her being able to sing, like behind the scenes. What does she do for warm-ups and that sort of stuff? That would be a great place to explore some of her insecurities where it would resonate with the audience. Like I said, this film flirts with complex emotions, and I do think that Pablo Larraín, give him a meaty script, and I think he could do wonders. But here, I just feel like he has exhausted the Oscar baity, feminist biopic thing. I don't gain much from any of these films beyond how lovely they are. This is one of those movies, I think, it's coming out on Netflix soon, so it's like it might be something that you just watch. You might enjoy it. It's not a bad film or anything like that. It's just not for me. I'm sure this movie will get all kinds of Oscar nominations, particularly when it comes to art direction and all of that, but it's just too self-conscious of an experience. But that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits, and I sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are great. Guys, thank you so much for your support. Welcome to all the new members. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.